Hello, it's Monday, and that means it's one of the quick updates. Today, I want to talk about making your aliens alien. That's a big, challenging thing for a lot of people and in a lot of ways. So, what do I mean when I say making your aliens alien? Well, think about Earth, and think about the way that life evolved all around the Earth. Think of all of the different species we have for all the different continents, why things are different, why some things are similar. Now imagine that the life on Africa and the life in Australia, right? They've taken two different directions just from being separated for a few million years. Think about life on Earth and life on a planet that's fuck all distance away, who's never had any contact with our Earth. Their life is completely unrelated to ours. It doesn't make sense that they would have bipedal humanoids with some fucked up foreheads as their dominant species. So what do we do about aliens? Well, the first thing we want to consider when we're thinking about aliens and making them actually alien is their environment. What kind of planet do they come from? How does that affect what they have evolved to be? Because if you come from Venus, for example, where the temperatures are incredibly hot, there's no visibility of the sky, it's just rocks and fire everywhere, you're going to have a lot different biological makeup than if you came from a lush jungle world or some kind of ocean planet. So consider where they came from. Next, consider how they'd be able to build a society with the design they have. This is a problem that I've seen in a lot of fiction when the story was thought out really well, but the design of like the aliens wasn't thought out very well. You'll run into a problem where the little part of your brain that thinks logically, it starts to say, hey, that wouldn't really work with the way they're made. And the example I want to give is this. Let's say you have an ocean planet, right? And you have spacefaring dolphin people, okay? Now, if we look at our own history, we as a society, we sort of define the spark of civilization as fire, right? Learning to control fire is when mankind really started to take off, right? And become more than just an animal. Well, how is a race of dolphin people going to create fire? They're not. They're underwater. So if they're not, we've got to think about what's going to be the stand-in for fire. And since fire has been the basis for so many different technologies, how has that affected their development? What is their technology like? Okay? The other thing you would have to think about with those sentient dolphin people, they don't have no fingers, right? So how do they grip stuff? What do they use? One thing I've seen work really well when you're dealing with like an ocean planet is like more of like a octopode type, because they've got the tentacles, they've got the big brains, they have the ability to go onto land for periods of time. So think about that. How did their society evolve in the world that they're in? Another thing to think about when you're making your aliens alien is the world around them. That's another one that I see. It's one thing that sort of annoyed me about Avatar when I was watching it, because I want you to think about all of the mammals that we have on the earth right now, and think of the basic design of the mammals. So you've got the skull, the backbone, the tail or tailbone. You've got biradial symmetry, right? So you've got the two arms, two legs, and when you look at like from a human to a whale to a vole they've all got the same basic shapes in their skeletons that are then just further modified for whatever they need to be, right? Like even whales have hips, right? Even humans have tailbones. We've all got that same stuff because we all came from a similar genetic background all the way back to a single common ancestor eventually, right? As far back as we go. So your alien world is going to have that same kind of thing. Like it doesn't make a lot of sense for, I don't like to use the term mammal when it comes to alien because of course it's a different planet. They would have different classifications, but a mammalian type of being, right? As your sentient creature. And he's got another mammalian type of being, and he has 4 arms, and that thing has like 6, right? Where's the split there? If they seem to have come from a similar ancestor, it's not something that I'm saying is scientifically impossible. That's not what I'm getting at all. What I'm getting at is that our brains, the subconscious part, starts to notice inconsistency like that and starts to draw it into question, and that can be immersion breaking for a lot of people, so we don't want to do that. Another thing to consider when you're considering making them alien is the visual and auditory spectrum. What I mean by that is a lot of times when people are writing, they'll make up like an alien language. As I've said before, we're going to talk about alien languages in a longer video because I have a lot to say about language. But when you're thinking of aliens speaking their native tongue, it's almost always something that is intelligible to humanity, something that humanity can learn and speak on their own. In reality, you have to consider that if they, whatever their equivalent of vocal cords is going to be completely unrelated to what we have, right? If it's similar, it's coincidentally similar. So it's going to sound different than sounds we're able to make. And it's possible it's going to be on a frequency that we can't even hear. Because that's the other thing that people don't seem to get. Even amongst humans themselves, there are frequencies that young people can hear and old people can't. And there are frequencies that older people can hear that younger people can't. Right? Now imagine an entirely different species. They could be saying words that we can't even hear. Right? We already have this with dog whistles and dogs. Right? Dogs can hear a dog whistle, we can't. They have a different hearing system than we do. We have a similar ancestor in our background, and we have different auditory processing than dogs. So imagine that the alien's going to have different speech capabilities and auditory capabilities. And the same goes for their vision. That's not as much about communication, but just what they're able to see. They might be able to see more into the infrared spectrum than we can. They might be able to see more into the ultraviolet, that's what it's called, ultraviolet spectrum. They won't see things the way that we do. Colors will mean different things to them because they'll be seeing them differently with different eyes. If they even have eyes like ours, if they have like compound eyes like an insect, they would see incredibly differently than we would. So think about that. And then finally, I'm going to hit this point every time I talk about aliens, every single time, forever. This is about making them alien, but it's also about making them more human at the same time. And that can be a confusing thing for me to say, but let me explain. Avoid the planet of hats all the damn time, okay? Not everyone on your planet is going to be, even if they have some kind of unified monoculture, the way language works is they're going to have dialects, they're going to have their own traditions that are like, regional specific. If you have a monoculture, it's like, for me, it's the most immersion breaking thing you can have with an alien is a monoculture. Even if we had aliens that looked exactly like us in a story, I could give it a pass until the entire planet has one culture, one language, one religion, and like when you go down to the planet, there's one city, and that's really all there is to the world. Breaking immersion is what you want to avoid, and that's a really good way to do it. So keep that in mind. I want to thank you for joining me this Monday. I will see you guys in a couple days for the Wednesday update. If you like what you heard, go ahead and like, subscribe. You can leave a comment down below if you think I'm full of shit, or if you agree with what I say, or if you just want to say something. Doesn't matter. Make sure to check us out on Facebook. I also have the Patreon up. That's where I put writing at least every Friday. Sometimes I do a little extra update. And I do have some exclusives. Those exclusives are for the Patreon patrons. I also want to say, if you have a chance, if you're interested in some cool designs, a friend of mine just started up a design company. It's called McMonster Media. You can find them on Facebook. Excellent stuff there. She's got a new Ruth Bader Ginsburg shirt up. Go ahead and check that out. I'll see you guys in a couple days. Thank you very much for checking me out. Have a great one.